Greetings. Thank you all for joining the Indivisible Illinois Facebook Live. And we are here every Thursday to talk about virus-free voting in Illinois. And what does that look like? We know right now that Trump is mobilizing to bring federal troops to Chicago and other cities to replicate what he's doing in Portland. We know that moms in Portland have formed walls to protect protesters, and they're also doing that, getting ready to do that in Chicago. My name is Leni Manaa-Hoppenworth, and I am with Indivisible Illinois. I'm with Indivisible IL9 on the north side of Chicago, and we are all grateful to be able to come together on Thursdays to talk to you, to bring others here into this conversation to talk about how we're going to not only survive this pandemic, but really think on what does it look like to thrive in our own communities. Right now, because of the pandemic, we see the effects of the lack of leadership on the federal level. We're very grateful for our own governor, J.B. Pritzker, and our mayor in Chicago for stepping up to remind people to wear their masks and to continue to social distance as we wait for scientists to bring to us either a vaccine or a treatment. Right now, we are very grateful to welcome several of our leaders in the Midwest, and we're very grateful for their time here, including women who have been leading in this movement for quite a long time. I myself have just started in my activism work, starting with the election of Donald Trump, did not know what to do, and joined in as a volunteer to mobilize people from Illinois to Washington, D.C. for the Women's March. And there, I remember listening to the speakers and wondering, what's next? And one of them was Michael Moore, and he said, just take your phone, and this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna put 5 people in a chat, and you're going to keep in touch with them for the next 4 years, because we really know that your friends and family can be the most important resource during a crisis. And that's what I did, and from there, we just continued to network. We found the Indivisible Guide on Google. It used to be a Google Doc, and now it's that's how we're informed nationally. There are many actions that are happening because Indivisible has formed to help communities understand and demystify power and how we can affect each election. One of them is by promoting and getting people into office that hold our progressive values, including our candidate, Joe Biden, which we all know we're going to check the box for November 3rd. And the other thing is that we, between every election, work on progressive issues. And for us, when we go to the ballot box on November 3rd in Illinois, we know that we're going to vote for a fair tax. I just got my mailer. In the mail, it says, vote by mail 2020. Important notice for Illinois voters. Voting by mail is the easy, secure, and convenient way to cast your ballot, and you can request your ballot application online today. And we are going to continue to promote the idea that we could front load people applying for their mail-in ballots so that they can vote safely from their homes, and they could drop the mail-in ballots in either at the USPS or in a drop box. But there are a lot of steps before we do that, right? That's why we're here today to listen to these great activists. I would like to, at this time, introduce Rose Colacino, who is the coordinator for Indivisible Illinois 2020 elections. She's been working in the field for a very long time on election security and has pivoted to protecting the elections in 2020. We're very grateful of all your work, Rose. Your volunteerism is really something to be commended, and we're also looking to you as for leadership on what's next in terms of vote by mail, and also what can we do to do the three things that we set out to do. Three things include holding our congressional house, and that includes Sean Casten, Lauren Underwood in the 6th and 14th district in Illinois, getting Marie Newman in the 3rd district across the line and getting her into office in 2 DC, thinking about Danny Brzezowski, who's also our endorsed candidate in IL 16, as well as Ray Lindsay, who's in the 12th district in Illinois. We're very excited, Rose, to have you on to talk about things like vote by mail, and also to have a great conversation with our 2 special guests. So with that, I would like to pass it to Rose Colacino.
Leni, thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here in such a great company, and I'm really excited to hear from our speakers. I do, if I could, want to just take a moment to honor the memory of Representative John Lewis. We are all saddened by his passage. We all recognize him as our leader and a giant in the civil rights movement, as well as voting rights. And this is the honest truth. I did have some comfort in the thoughts of Angela Lang and Deborah Harris. I know that these strong women will move on, and they will mourn his loss, of course, but they know what they need to do. And I have been watching them both from afar, and now a little bit closer. I've had the opportunity to get to know them, and I hope to continue to get to know them better. I think, as Leni stated, this is a long haul, and this is going to take all of us working together. So with that, I'm going to start the evening by introducing Deborah Harris. So Deborah Harris is the Executive Director of Action Now Chicago and was the state coordinator of Women's March Washington for Nevada. Just a little personal information. It's only been possibly a couple of weeks, a month, but we have been working more closely with Deborah and our vote by mail task force. And we are working with Deborah to learn and be educated about how we can expand the electorate in her community. So without further ado, Deborah, it's all yours.
Oh, mine. Thanks for having us again. I'm so excited to be here with you all. My girl Angela, who I learned so much from. Like, what are you doing about walking? Oh my God, teach me your ways. But yes, I was speaking to Leni earlier about all the things, Chicago and the 2020 elections, and just the future of Illinois, where we are, along with the many crises that our city is in, our state, our country. And, you know, I said something to you, Leni, earlier on, and I was like, we gotta want our freedom more than they want our death. And for me, that informs like how we organize, how we build relationship, how we strategize for the short term and the long term, how we remove ourselves from our silos, how we feel about this moment and take in this moment of uprisings and dealing with COVID and how that's impacting our communities, whilst looking to 2020 and beyond for Chicago. And when we started talking about, like, you know, how do we get people engaged with vote by mail after seeing what happened across this country, even in, you know, city of Chicago during our primary, in March, seeing what happened in Milwaukee, you know, just like, you know, figuring out our game plan and how to reach those that don't have internet, don't have phones, whatever it may be, even if we're meeting, you know, in person, you know, in smaller sections, you know, covered up, maxed up, and hazmat suit up, just to make sure we are delivering this information, not just in Chicago, but cross-state, especially in red counties where there are pockets of Black people who may be super disconnected from what is going on, what's on the horizon. And so like for me and my organization, through these next several months and through this next month, particularly August, how am I reaching as many Black folks as I can across the state that may not have access to internet to do a Zoom, to a Facebook Live, to learn about how to vote by mail, who may not have access to even a computer to get online, to sign up. So, you know, how am I pulling together resources to set up pop-up shops, to get them the information, to hopefully sign them up right there on the spot, you know, at the park, you know, parking lots, but also how am I taking this information across the state and sharing with Black folks, like what's on the horizon for fair tax, if they have not even heard about the progressive tax that's on the ballot this November, but also just collecting the voice and vision of Black folks across the state, to help us further inform policy and legislation on the horizon. And also as we look to 2022 and 23, but really getting people to understand that this isn't just about the next 4 years. This isn't just about Trump and Biden. This is about what Trump represents, what his Senate represents, control of the Department of Justice represents, the global impact, and what we could be looking at as a full erasure of our democracy and republic as we know it. That's a lot of work, because most people, you know, we're discussing choosing between two evils and getting ready to vote in November. But for me, it's really having hard discussions about, you know, this is about the livelihood of our country and your voice here. And what that means, and hoping to educate people and empower people in a way where they are taking the next 5 to 10 years to the ballot box and not just the next 4, you know, and building upon that power going forward and getting more engaged with, you know, local elections and congressional races and Senate races and things like that going forward, and are getting more engaged in our justice races and things like that. So that's really where I am with Illinois. Like, it's about preserving a progressive Black agenda across the state, because what we cannot afford to do with the housing displacement, with the violence, Black folks leaving because of low economic resources, education, healthcare, XYZ, we are losing a huge part of the democratic voting power, which leaves us very vulnerable to turning purple, which then leaves us very vulnerable to flip entirely. And we cannot afford to lose Illinois if we're gonna save the Midwest. So it's like, know your North Star in this moment. Hold on to your North Star. And Angela, like, yes. So that is what is informing this moment. You know, staying true to that course and using the uprisings and creating access points and pivot points, and hopefully within this moment, literally building a brand new table, literally across the board, that takes all of us out of our silos and really builds out strategy for the next 5 to 10 years across the board. How do we hold and expand progressive Black power in the Midwest that's true to what we need? And now I'm done.
Sorry, I was so mesmerized that I didn't unmute myself, but thank you so much. I think that's a roadmap, and we hope to be there with you. Thank you so much, Deborah, and Deborah will be back. I want to take this opportunity to now introduce Angela Lang. Angela Lang is the Executive Director of Black Leaders Organizing Community. Angela was born and raised in Milwaukee and has an extensive background in community organizing. Another personal touch in my meeting of Angela, I call it a calling, what have you, but back in 2018 in the summer, I felt the need to go to Milwaukee. There was an event. It was actually a Women's March event It was just an event during the summertime, and I went, I dragged my husband, and we had the opportunity to select a number of events, postcard writing, phone calling, and I saw something about this organization named BLOC. And there was a bus and there was canvassing. I was somewhat of a canvasser, not a regular canvasser, and I got on the bus, and I'm so glad that I did. I was able to meet, I think, first Angela's crew, and I canvassed with my husband. The neighborhood couldn't have been more gracious to us, and Angela and her group couldn't have been more gracious, and it's an experience that I will never forget. So with that, I turn it over to Angela.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me and for the kind words. And one of the many reasons that Deborah and I get along so well is because we view the world very similarly. We view organizing very similarly. And that's why, like, the first time we met, like, in real life, we, like, bonded very quickly. So thank you for being a sister in this fight with me and being in the Midwest, because being a Black person in the Midwest can be tricky, and it's a very unique experience. And really, when I was thinking about and preparing for this conversation, is just really understanding the importance of year-round organizing and this idea of transactional conversations that we tend to have, and how do we move away from that and have more transformative conversations? How do we make sure that we aren't coming in a couple weeks before an election, not building relationships, may not be from the community, may not understand how the community even interacts, and it doesn't look like us, and say, hey, this is what you need to do. You need to make sure that you vote on Tuesday and everything is going to magically be great. There's no follow-up, there's no organizing, but really it seems very transactional, and that our votes were just extracted, but really we weren't being asked to have a seat at the table to implement policy, to discuss what an agenda would look like. And at the end of the day, I think about the reason I started organizing and why I was kind of started to get really interested when I was younger in politics is because at the end of the day, we all just want to do the right thing. We may disagree on what the right thing is, but we want to make sure that we are connecting authentically with people and that we are doing whatever we can to live healthy, robust, long, thriving lives. And at the end of the day, that means being able to connect with people on a personal human level. That's why a lot of us do this work. That's why elected officials and the people that we don't like, in their mind, that's why they do that work. There's fundamental differences, but they think that they are doing the right things, and they think that they're making their worlds better. Obviously, there's ideological and values differences, but what's at the core of it is making sure that we are building relationships and connections with one another. Because at the end of the day, we are not able to overcome white supremacy, this hetero, patriarchal, capitalistic culture that keeps us down. We're not able to overcome that if we're not able to build authentic, genuine relationships with each other, not see each other as votes in commodities or data points. I love the fact that everybody cares about Black voters in the Midwest all of a sudden, but very rarely do I hear people talk about our issues, ask us what our issues are. Everyone just wants to talk about who has the most percentage points with the Black community. What does this polling say? What does this data point say? Black and brown communities are more than just polls and data points and data sets and just a free-for-all of trying to get as many Black votes as possible. At the end of the day, what does that mean if you're not interacting and uplifting and putting forth policies that are actually going to uplift our communities? And so for me, when I think about this election, in 2020 in general, this election and this whole year is nothing like I expected it to go. I knew it was going to be a little bit of a mess, understanding what 2016 was like. We knew we were going to be in for a fight. No one could have imagined just how severe it has all been, how personal it has been. I am still processing, and quite frankly will be very emotional once I decompress today about the news of what it looks like to have extra resources, as they say, deployed on Milwaukee to curb violent protests and to curb violence in general, violent crime. Black and brown folks have a target on our back. We've always had this target on our back, but it seems like it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's terrifying. When people say this is the most important election of our lives, it seems like it doesn't quite fit. This actually feels like it now. People's lives are at risk. They're at stake. Our futures are at risk and are at stake because we've lost that basic humanity in each other, and our policies show it. And the reason why it's important, even though this election did not go the way I wanted it to, my candidates that I supported in the primary aren't here now, but that's fine, because at the end of the day, white supremacy, misogyny, transphobia, xenophobia, all of that is on the ballot. All of those things are on the ballot in November. But we also need to be honest and mindful that we need to do more than just vote Trump out of office in November. There's a lot to be done and undone. And just because Trump is out of office, it's not suddenly everything goes back to normal, because quite honestly, and we don't have these conversations a lot, white supremacy has existed long before Trump, and it's going to exist long after Trump. And we need to understand that simply getting him out of the office does not deconstruct these systems of oppression that are holding us back. And it's going to take all of us, rooted in community, rooted in the humanity of each other, and rooted in joy, to make sure that we're propping each other up, we're supporting each other, we're holding each other, and we're able to really dig into a vision of this world. The silver lining of this moment is that people are having conversations that I was in spaces years ago, and I thought defunding the police was crazy. And I was like, no one's gonna buy into our ideas. We were having these conversations. We were in these rooms years ago about defunding the police, and now they're mainstream. And now this is a beautiful opportunity for us to vision without borders and boxes and, conditions of what we're normally used to, of how we're imagining safety. We can literally throw that away and start over and reimagine safety. We can vision together, and we can really think outside of the box. Instead of settling for crumbs and incremental change, we're able to actually come together, hold each other in community, hold each other in space and in love and joy, and being able to work towards a vision that we want to see. And that starts by voting in November, but it continues, and it needs to be long lasting. And that's how we're going to understand how we get that transformative change. So I'll stop there. I can go on, but I appreciate this conversation, and I think it's got to be first of many, because there's so much to deconstruct in this moment right now. But thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We need to listen to these women. Deborah and Angela have answers, and I will continue listening, and I hope you continue talking, because I think if we follow your path, the world would be a much different place than it is today. I want to ask, if I could, some questions. I'll try not to be too greedy. I think the public out there in internet world has a lot of questions too. But my question is really twofold, and whoever wants to start, that would be great. The way I'm looking at it, at least for the short term, is that we most definitely want to get the word out. We need to vote, and that actually is going to speak to what Heba is going to discuss later, but we also need to protect the vote. I did learn from you, Angela, about the federal forces that are going to come to Wisconsin. We've heard about Lori Lightfoot battling the federal forces they want to send to Chicago, and we really know where that's going. There's been a lot of chatter about that having a lot to do with November. So I'd like to hear from both of you about how we, first of all, do get the vote out. Deborah has educated me, because we are pushing social media quite a bit to get the vote out. And Deborah told me that Wi-Fi connectivity can be kind of low in some of the communities that she serves. So number one, how do we reach that community to make sure that their votes are counted, to make sure they, whatever their preference is, my preference is that they fill out a vote by mail application or go to the polls. Prefer that they fill out the application. I think it's safer in that ballot. And then the second part of the question, two questions really, is how do we protect the vote? I'm concerned with the consent decree being lifted in Wisconsin, that there's going to be some goons out there, and there's going to be intimidators out there. So two-part question, if I can hand it over to Deborah first.
The Zoom is doing fancy things. Sorry, that's what that was. for me in Chicago, knowing that like certain wards on the west side and on the south side and even in Southland, which a lot of people just forget about, which is like just decimated and just doesn't have a lot of resources. Like I'm trying to connect with direct service organizations, because my organization doesn't necessarily do direct service, although we have pivoted a bit to help out with the need. And that's how we've been able to like have deeper conversations with people and talk to them about what's on the horizon. But connecting with direct services and nonviolence prevention organizations and places like that that are like in the community space, even on a different level, and like educating them on vote by mail and like going out with them on the street to talk about vote by mail. There was a young man that I've seen a few times now at some of our community events. He's a corner boy, you know, he do what he do to survive. I seen the homeboy in my apartment complex like the other day. I was like, but he's somebody I've been thinking about because his ear is to the street in another way. You know, I want to know, dude, are you registered to vote? Like, you got an address to vote from? Your boys got an address to vote from? Your family, you know, like, well, finding a way to possibly like even raise money to hire him for a few weeks, you know, to talk to him, like, you know, what is it that matters to him? You know, how does he feel about this system? You know, and like work with him to you know, craft messaging and make it palatable and like hear about people's real issues and introduce this vote by mail, you know, like, so I'm just trying to figure out any way to get to people. Like, I think with organizations, we have a tendency to organize ourselves, but not really be in the community the way we need to be and be willing to get our hands super dirty, you know, and literally go to the corner people, literally go to areas where the homeless and our sex workers are, you know, like, and be like, yo, let me just talk to you really quick about this. You know, like Angela said, like building those relationships, doing that deep organizing work, and then coming in with, you know, well, how do you want to affect change in your community? Like, are you even ready for what's coming in November and beyond? Gonna be doing a lot of that work in August and just working with these direct service institutions and just go out there with them and doing more smaller community listening sessions in parks. We started that last week. Gonna try and do 3 phases of each in different like wards that really have low voter turnout, and just like listening to them, talking to them about the issues, talking to them about the census, talking to them about, you know, the vote by mail, you know, talking to them about the uprisings, about defund police, like what does this mean for our state? So really having these conversations and integrating those things that are like really on the table right now, and then taking that into 2021, 22, 23, 24. But I do understand about protecting the vote, and I think with the federal agents here, that's going to create even more just weariness around those that do choose to go to the polls. There could be some serious foolishness there. There really could. Like I don't put anything past this president at all. And so it's like building out even strategy to protect our people at the polls, our workers, our poll judges, you know, whatever it is. Like, how are we really preparing ourselves? So like those are things I'm trying to strategize around right now, and like just organize staff and community partners around to be thinking about this and implementing some strategy around it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Angela, it's all yours.
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations have had to find a way to pivot very quickly and be nimble due to COVID. For us, I was really, really excited for this. We had a very ambitious goal of knocking 500,000 doors. And I was so excited to like smash that goal and to like run laps and tell all the great people about like all the work that we did. And we just aren't able to do that. And it breaks my heart that we're not able to be out in the field. We're hoping, fingers crossed, that we're able to be out in the field at some point. We got masks made for our folks when they do go out in the field, if we're ever able to. But we're trying to get creative in this moment. And so we're doing the traditional digital stuff that has started to happen the last few years. We're texting, we're phone banking, we're doing those things, you know, we're holding the virtual phone banks, but then we're also knowing, as Deborah mentioned, not everybody is connected to us digitally. One, we just haven't had a reach to everybody. And two, we also have some connectivity issues. And there's still a global pandemic happening where people are struggling to survive. And actually was just having this conversation with my team this morning, is that cell phones, if not already, are going to start to get shut off. And so then there's not that avenue to call and to text. And then, you know, are we still able to connect with you digitally? And so while the society, the last several cycles has like moved towards a digital realm, we're all stuck at home and there's all these different things that are coming up. So we're also thinking about, do we go back to some old school tactics? Are we putting, you know, flyers up in gas stations? Are we putting stuff in grocery stores? You know, are we trying to get stuff in those neighborhood newspapers again? And something that we're thinking about, because we, you know, love knocking doors. Our team is desperate to go back in the field. They're like, Angela, when are we going back out on doors? But we're thinking, you know, as a compromise, can we do what we call lit drops, where we have a piece of literature and normally we give it to someone after a conversation, but instead of having that conversation, we wouldn't even knock their door. We would just stick it in their door. And we're thinking of having like we're calling it like a reintroduction piece. Hey, sorry, we're not able to talk to you face to face in the field like we normally would. Here's information to stay safe with COVID. Here's information about voting. And then here's a phone number and an email address to have a one-on-one conversation if you need to be connected to resources or you need any information about voting. And then, you know, we hope to see you soon. You know, please stay safe. Follow us on our social media as well for the most up-to-date information. So we're thinking about trying to do some of the stuff like that. Mailers, radio, some tactics that people may feel are outdated are really, really relevant right now. And I think when it comes to the intimidation, I don't even know if I have an answer for that. It's something that's been weighing heavily on my mind because of this president. I think, you know, the racialized tensions, and we know that it's going to be problematic, and it's not enough just to have an election observer. It's not enough I was election observer in 12, to have this just college kids sit there for 12, 13 hours. Like, that's not going to be enough. We're going to have we need to have legal experts. We need to have people that are fully prepared to throw down and to de-escalate if anything does happen. And we need to start coordinating that. And I don't think a lot of people, quite frankly, are talking about the intimidation portion of it. I know for me, I feel like I'm putting out like 10 different fires. And that's one of many in the back of, I think, a lot of our minds, but we really do need to start to coordinate our efforts and making sure that people are safe voting, not just with COVID, but also making sure there's no like violence or intimidation at the polls as well.
Excellent. I hope everybody is taking notes. And Leni, I want to ask if we have time for some audience questions, or at least one. I'll turn that over to you if you can let me know what's in the chat.
Yeah, so thank you for that, Rose. Please feel free to pass up any questions to our guest speakers. You know, we talked about a lot of things on this call, and as I said, I hope that this is one of many, many that we have, because we are really trying very hard to reimagine our futures right now in many different ways. You know, small businesses are struggling, nonprofits are reorganizing, teams are changing their names. You know, everybody is re-examining what is it that the future looks like for them. But also, you know, on this call, we're definitely just very much focused on how are we going to vote safely? How is our vote going to be secure? And how are people going to have access to the ballot boxes in November? And so no matter who you are, like on the spectrum of activism, we need you now, even if it is to spread the word that you can actually apply for a vote by mail ballot right now, to talk to your friends and neighbors that the election is coming, whether we like it or not, and that your engagement matters. And then beyond this election, what is it that we're going to do to continue to help protect our democracy? Because truly, you know, it's not just about these last 4 years or the next possible 4 years with Trump in office, but how is it that we are going to examine and reflect and learn from the way that we're structured right now as a society, and how are we going to move forward from there? Because as we said, you know, Angela and Deborah just pointed out that this is a point where we can actually think about what does a real future look like that is beyond Trump. So thank you all for being here. Rose, do you have any last questions or closing thoughts that we can end with?
I just want to thank Deborah and Angela. I hope you continue being on these calls, because I do feel that it takes reinforcement. I think there's a lot of noise out there. I think this is an area where we should be concentrating, and we have some additional great women that are going to speak in a moment about just that, about expanding the electorate and also protecting the vote. But I believe it's going to take all of us working really hard and not looking up until November 4th, and hopefully we have a big celebration at that time. So with that, I'm grateful. I'm going to really shorten my remarks because I want to have more time to hear from Heba and Ellen as well. And I also have the pleasure of knowing both of these strong, powerful women. And as far as my piece, yes, we have been working on vote by mail for some time. I was on the election security side until the pandemic hit, and we have a strong team. Our resounding message is to, of course, ensure safe, secure, and accessible elections. And the first phase of that is social media. There's other ways to go about it, but we're starting with social media. And we did speak to Angela prior to this call about chasing the vote. That's something that you'll hear about later. But right now, I asked Kelly to share in the chat our brand new and always evolving social media kit. And I ask you to please take a look at that, add to it. Essentially, we have been asked by the election authorities, whom we have built relationships with over the last couple of years, to really front end this thing. It, in my opinion, is perhaps not going to be safe to go to the polls. So if we have the opportunity, let's go ahead and request those applications, fill them out, get those ballots, fill them out. And you'll see in the social media toolkit, you'll see tweets and you'll see Facebook posts, keeping in mind that for some communities, we might be printing out applications and distributing them. I've been in conversation with a woman that has been doing a phenomenal job with door tags. Deborah and our group spoke about that. So whatever it takes, I think the powerful women in this Zoom call, watching to this Facebook, and the men too, will be getting the word out. So yes, please do. I want to see a lot of opens on my Bitly for that social media kit. Let's go forward with that. But now I want to introduce to you, first of all, Ellen Campbell. So if you take a look at that bio, it's pretty incredible. And I have to tell you, I have known Ellen again from afar, and then getting to know her personally over the recent time. She is as nice as she is accomplished. And she's been working really hard. They don't have a huge staff, but it is a growing staff. And it is very powerful, and they will be on the front lines, and they will be protecting the vote in Wisconsin. Sometimes people ask me, why are you splitting your time between Illinois and Wisconsin? Wisconsin, everyone, if you didn't know, is incredibly, incredibly important to the country. I firmly believe that all roads to the White House lead through Wisconsin. So the work that Ellen is doing and Heba is doing is also just critically important. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Ellen, and I want to hear about the good work going on in the voter protection and how we can help. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you so much, and really appreciate it, Rose. And I just want to say that nothing I do matters without the work that Angela and Deborah are doing to get people excited to go to the polls and to actually vote. But once they do all that work, it matters that people are able to vote. And we are currently in the middle of a pandemic, which is causing unprecedented difficulties. I'm sure Angela, you're in Milwaukee, has dealt with trying to explain to hundreds of people that have never voted by mail before the convoluted reality of voting an absentee ballot in Wisconsin, in which you have to upload a picture of your ID. When you get the ballot, you have to provide 3 forms of certification on the certification envelope: your signature, a witness signature, and a witness address. Without any one of the 3, your ballot will not be counted. This is a lot to explain to people. It's new, it's different, and it's particularly difficult in the context that we find ourselves in which in April in Milwaukee, as you may know, we were only able to open 5 polling places out of 180. This means that even if they rev people up to vote, even if people are for the first time enthused and care about making a difference in their communities at the ballot box, they're confronted with this situation where they have to wait 5 hours in line in the hail in order to try and make their voice heard. That is unacceptable. Why I'm here talking about it is because I work for the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. I'm in the voter protection organization. We have turned our organizing power to doing things that we have not really done before. We have been spending the last month and a half aggressively trying to find more poll workers for every county in Wisconsin, focusing a little bit more on Milwaukee County and Milwaukee City in particular, so that we can open as many polling places as we can in November. Why I'm talking to you about this is because poll workers and poll observers typically tend to be in the retirement age range, and that means that COVID is just higher risk for them. They have to make a very difficult choice if they choose whether or not to go work the polls or stay at home. And so we have been focusing our recruitment efforts in Wisconsin for poll workers on younger people without pre-existing conditions who are more likely to be able to take this risk to protect our democracy, to keep the polls open for people so they can make their voices heard. That means that we are facing a massive shortage as we convert everyone that has ever been a poll observer in that age range to Wisconsin into a poll worker. I'm here because we're trying to backfill that. And we need to find some poll observers. And we are specifically recruiting for 2 areas. First, the outside poll observer, where it's lower risk. You go outside, you see how long the line is, you report to us, you ask voters what their experience was like inside. Did they feel safe? Are there clear signs showing people where they can vote curbside? And then the second position, which is central count. And I just want to say why this is important. We are dealing with an election in a pandemic in which 70% of the population of Wisconsin voted by mail in April. I expect it's going to be even higher in November. Because there are so many convoluted requirements in order to vote by mail in Wisconsin, the challenge procedure for these ballots is going to happen without voters there to stand up for their rights. We need people in that room that will stand up for the right of that voter and try to make sure that their ballot is counted, that they're given a chance to correct if there's an error on the ballot, and that we can make sure that their voice is heard. This is going to be important because, you know, they won't be able to be there. They'll have sent in their absentee ballot. And I think the number one thing that produces distrust, I took a bunch of declarations from voters after the April election in order to help us with some of the litigation we were working on to try and ask for relief. And one thing really stands out to me. One of my voters she wrote a poem. She was this very smart, educated woman, and she wrote 2 poems. And one of them was about sort of the emotional impact of not understanding why your ballot didn't count. Not understanding, like, you went to all this effort, you tried so hard, and still it didn't matter. Stacey Abrams talks about this in her book as well, this idea that if you make it too hard, it's actually worse than just that one election. This person that may have gotten their hopes up and believed they could make a difference and gone and taken all these efforts feels like it came to nothing, and they're less likely to try the next time, not more likely. This is why it's absolutely important that we make sure that these votes count. We're also running a volunteer hotline, and this matters because this allows us to get intelligence ahead of time, which allows us to solve problems. One story that came to mind when I was listening to you guys, I got a call from, I think it was Winnebago County. And so this is going to be obvious to a lot of people on this call why this would be a problem. But the caller to the hotline was a Black woman, and she went to drop off her absentee ballot in a drop box, and it turned out that her municipality had put their drop box inside the police station. And so obviously, you know, the clerk is not thinking when they do that this is going to intimidate a section of the electorate, that this is going to, and I think the other thing that came to mind is she was like, well, you know, the police think a certain way, and like, I don't know if I can trust the chain of custody for my ballot. Like, I am deeply nervous that, you know, they saw me come in, they saw what I look like, they made assumptions about how I'm going to vote. How do I trust them to protect my ballot and get it to where it gets counted? And so what we're trying to do is make sure the hotline is open to take questions like that, so that we can then call the clerk and get that Dropbox moved to somewhere where it doesn't cause that sort of problem, where we need to get poll observers in central count and outside these polling locations so we can find out what the issues are and try to solve them before it's too late. And we're remarkably light on the resources to do this in Wisconsin right now, because we can't ask people who are at high risk for COVID to go and put themselves at risk in these situations. And we are prioritizing everyone that is low risk to be poll workers, because frankly, it doesn't help me to hear about 4-hour lines in Milwaukee. And I say this from personal experience in the April election. It is incredibly awful to hear about situations like that, 80-year-olds waiting in 4-hour lines in the hail in order to vote, when there is nothing you can do about it because there are no more poll workers and you cannot open other polling locations or shift resources or anything. So we've set up our system of priorities, and I'm going to send some links to be put in the Facebook chat for places where you can learn more. We're doing a poll observer training specifically geared towards Illinois activists next Thursday. We have a hotline training on Saturday, and we are also recruiting for our phone bank to call sort of younger, hopefully low-risk people across Wisconsin to try and recruit them as poll workers. I cannot overemphasize how important this is to make sure that we can actually have an election that works in November, so that all the efforts of all our hardworking organizers everywhere don't go to waste when that person is faced with conditions well past what anyone should be expected to face in order to vote. I'll put that to be put in the chat, and I'll turn it over to Heba. Okay.
If I could take a moment to introduce Heba, and had the opportunity to do this quite a few times, and we're really grateful that Heba keeps coming back. And before I do that, though, I do want to thank Ellen, and I want to tell everybody that I have been on the hotline, as have other Indivisibles, and it is challenging. I won't say it's not, but it is incredibly fulfilling. We had folks tell us, I did it back in April for the spring election, and they felt that the people on the hotline turned that election. And I'm still in shock that Judge Karofsky won. And I think that we have a lot to do. I see a question from Denise. I've been doing both Wisconsin and Illinois. I know that's not practical for everybody. I think you have to go where you think your talents lead you. But if you do have the opportunity, I would say both Wisconsin and Illinois, both critical. So with that, I want to go back to Heba, and I want to give her a proper introduction. I had the opportunity to meet Heba, I don't know Heba now, it seems a number of months, but I think some of the issue with Heba's hiring is that there was an infiltration of Illinois volunteers going to Wisconsin and wanting to help. Back in the summer, I believe it was 2019, we had about 40 Indivisibles canvassing, August, and then that led to about 200 of us, and then we had to pivot, of course, because of the pandemic. And I felt that the Wisconsin Democrats, in their infinite wisdom, knew that they needed a professional to come in and just specifically be there for us, the out-of-state volunteers. So couldn't be more thrilled that they made that very smart hire, and I hired Heba. Excuse me, we have been working very closely with her. We've had a number of phone banks across different Indivisible groups, and I hope to continue to do so. And now, Heba, the floor is all yours, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Rose. And thank you for inviting me to come back to these conversations every week. It's always such an honor to learn from all of you and from the guests who are on the call. So thank you for letting me be in the space and to share and learn from all of you. I will keep my remarks brief, but one thing I want to mention is I feel particularly moved by the conversations about long-term change, right? So we are about 100 days from the election, but everything that I've heard tonight is 100% valid and true. We cannot stop working after those 100 days are over. We can take our break, we can take our respite for a few days, but using the opportunity when we win to then talk about how do we pivot and how do we use our leverage in our community that we built over these last several months, in some cases years, to make sure that our communities are being heard and our priorities are being listened to, and we are being a part of these conversations and getting invited to the table or bringing ourselves there if we're not. So one of the things I want to touch on is, in Wisconsin, after 2016, we pivoted to working on a neighborhood action team model that would benefit the long-term progressive fabric of Wisconsin. This model is meant to continue on through elections and to make sure that local volunteers, local organizers are the ones who are investing in their communities. It is great that every election year, we have a lot of folks who want to focus on Wisconsin, who send us money, that we get to collaborate with other campaigns. But what happens when those campaigns leave? And that's really what this neighborhood action team model is all about. And we are so proud that this has worked for us and that we have so many volunteers across communities, geographically, culturally, from different backgrounds, who are coming together to say, this is my community, and I want to make sure that we're electing Democrats and continuing to engage in the process once they have been elected. Part of the way that we are continuing to build onto this model and make sure that it is successful is by having phone banks to find new voters, to find new potential volunteers to plug into that model. And as we are approaching the 100 days, we are hosting more phone banks. So Saturday marks 101 days until the election. Sunday is 100 days. And this weekend, we are calling voters in Wisconsin to identify more Democrats, to build our universe so that come, at this point, September, when absentee ballots start going out and get out the vote begins, we can reach more Democrats and make sure that we are having a good turnout that will result in the election victories that we want, so that we can start having more of these conversations about the long-term progress of the policies representing our communities. This weekend, we are focusing on the bridge building. I know many of you have done those calls with us, and we're so appreciative. One thing that I want to note is, I think one of the questions I get from our out-of-state team quite often is, as an out-of-state person, how am I making a difference, right? If your model is focused on local teams, why does it matter that I'm making these calls? And what I can say is, as you're making these calls and identifying more voters, you're helping us find those volunteers. You're helping us find the voters that our existing teams can reach out to and have those local one-on-one conversations that maybe they didn't know existed as an opportunity prior to that. So you are doing a lot of work for us. You're giving our neighborhood action teams additional capacity and time to really continue building on their community, having these one-on-one conversations, and that is really truly valuable to us. So thank you always for participating in these phone banks and working with us. If you are not already signed up for this weekend, you can visit wisdems.org/101 days. That's 101 days to get signed up. And the other thing I'll add here is I just want to shout out Ellen as my colleague and her team for being on top of the voter protection. We talk to a lot of voters who do need extra support to walk through the process, and we're so grateful to have them to turn to, and to have volunteers who are really invested in this entire process, from protecting the vote to turning out the vote to making sure that once the vote happens, we are continuing on our progressive path forward. So I will stop there, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, Heba. I, for one, am glad I have a seat at this table. I always learn so much from all of you. And I see we're at 8 o'clock. Do we have time for questions for Heba and Ellen? Sorry, I think that's a yes. Okay, if I can just, because it takes some reinforcing. I know with the vote by mail campaign, I sometimes feel like I'm repeating myself, but there's, again, so much noise out there that we need some clarity. If from Ellen and Heba, if we can hear from you one more time. Number one, what's the number one priority you would like to see if you had a volunteer coming to you this second? Ellen first, what would you like that volunteer to do? And then Heba.
It kind of depends on who the volunteer is. If they're low risk for COVID, I would love to have some poll watchers. I'd like to have some visibility on what's happening in the ground so that we can solve it in real time. I got a declaration in Milwaukee on April 7th about this woman that was told by a police officer at 8 p.m. that her polling place was closed and she had to go home. She'd been waiting in line for an hour. If we'd known about that at the time, like, that's illegal. Like, if you're in line when your polling place closes, you're allowed to vote. We could have stopped it. So poll observers are really important because they stop things like that happening. If they are older and higher risk for COVID, I could really use help with the big phone bank we're doing this Sunday to try and recruit poll workers across Wisconsin in order to open as many polling places as we possibly can, in order to make lines shorter and reduce disenfranchisement. Because make no mistake, when you have 4-hour-long lines, you are disenfranchising people.
Yeah,
and I'll turn it over to Heba now.
Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, great question. Now that we are unable to go door to door to have in-person conversations, we found that phone banking is the most effective way to still have these in-depth conversations that are building relationships with voters and making sure that they are feeling heard, and we are actually learning from these conversations as well what the priorities are in our communities. So if someone were to show up right now, my first ask would be, can we get you on the phone to start reaching out to voters?
Excellent responses. Thank you, ladies. And with that, I turn it over to Leni.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Heba from the Wisconsin Dems for joining us. Thank you, Rose, for facilitating this conversation with our guest speakers, including Deborah Harris from Action Now and also Angela Lang. I would love for them to, Angela and Deborah, to have the last words in this conversation, including ways to reach you and to get involved in what you're doing, maybe some action steps for the week, and then hopefully we'll be able to connect with you at another time. I will pass it on to Deborah first.
Thanks for having me. If you're not following us already on Action Now 1 on Facebook, Action Now Shy on Twitter, that's where you can find out like where we're at. If you're interested in donating, find us on actionnowshy.org. But definitely, I guess the last words are, man, I don't even know, like, don't quit, man. Like, I had to call an organizer in a downstate county that's very new to this. And I get it. It is terrifying. People will come for you. You will be threatened. Like, when you talk about, you know, speaking up for your rights and doing the work, people aren't going to be happy about that. And I had to call him and be like, yo, what do you need? What do you need? Please don't bow out. Please don't bow out. I get it. And so it's just like, I guess my last words are surround yourself with community. Surround yourself with people that understands the weight of this moment, and let's get it done. Let's just get it done. Support each other however we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for being here. And we're going to put your links into the chat box too. And I'll pass it now to Angela.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. I think it's really important for us to continue to have conversations outside of our traditional cities. And I think regionally, it's really important. It's something that I've been trying to focus on a little bit more. So glad to be here, and glad to know Deborah too. We always tell people, like, there's 3 different ways that people can stay connected to us or get involved. One, and we'll put this in the chat as well, one is being able to amplify our content on social media. We want to make sure the word is getting out to as many people as possible. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at BLOC by BLOC MKE. And we just want to make sure that, 1, people are getting the information, but 2, people are really having difficult conversations when it comes to race. And I think it's important to be able to amplify the lived experiences of the work that we're doing right now to also help guide those conversations. 2, I would be a bad executive director if I didn't ask for money. So we have 3 separate donation links. We have an education fund, which is our nonpartisan work. We have a C4, which is our partisan in-state work. And then just recently, we have opened a PAC, which will allow us to say things like vote for Biden and anti-Trump. So the PAC will be able to fund that specific work. And so all of those links are on our website, and we'll put that in the chat as well. And the last thing is there somebody somebody that you think that we should be connected to. Because again, we think it's important to have these conversations. If you all know people in Milwaukee, and you can ask them, maybe I know them or I'm connected to them, or even other folks, either individuals that may be interested in giving, individuals that want to support in other ways, organizations. Deborah and I try to collaborate where we can. We want to be able to collaborate with others. But then also, do you know somebody who does a podcast from his basement and you think I'd be a good guest, right? Whatever it is, we love to be able to be connected to any of your networks as well, as a way to kind of broaden our reach too.
Thank you so much, Angela. And I'm just going to open it up to say hello and thank you all of you for joining here on this call today. 103 days, I believe, until Election Day. I like to look on Kelly's board there, and there it is, 103 days. It is all about building our relationships, starting with our own communities and friends and families, but also engaging beyond that. So thank you all for joining for this last hour, and I hope to continue this conversation with you. I'm praying for the day where I could do it in person with you, because you know that would be my preference. But until that time, would love to see you again on another virus-free voting Illinois live stream. Thank you all. Have a great night.